Thank you very much, Karina. First of all, I'd just like to thank the panel for participating today. They're all industry leaders with very, very busy schedules, and for them to take the time out to be able to participate today, it's greatly appreciated, and we look forward to your insight today. In terms of the format that we're going to have today, each panelist will do a short presentation of their company and its current position in the market. Afterwards, there will be 3 themes which will be covered by the panel. All 4 panelists will be asked same 3 questions, 1 for each theme. After the answers, all 4 of them will have a chance to follow up and react to the other panelists' answers. It'll be my job as a moderator to decide when it's time to move on. At the end, there will be time for questions from the floor, and I also may have some questions that I'll ask specifically to individual panelists. With that being said, I'd like to introduce the panelists. The first person I'd like to introduce is Ken Shields. Mr. Shields is Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer of Conifex Timber, a public Canadian company operating in forestry, sawmilling, and green energy sectors. Mr. Shields has a background in corporate finance and is a former director of Slocan Forest Products, Mercer International, and Timber West. Please welcome Mr. Shields.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for your time this morning. It's my pleasure on behalf of all of us at Conifex to tell you a little bit about our company before we get on to the main topics. So here's a slide that no one can ever read, so I'll skip it. But this is a snapshot of where we are at today. I was the first employee of Conifex, and in 2008 we bought our first facility at Fort St. James, BC. In 2010 at Mackenzie, BC. In 2011 we started a green energy plant, a 36 megawatt power plant at Mackenzie, BC. We, at the time, people thought that we were doing the wrong thing because we spent about $100 million on the plant, and we didn't spend that capital on upgrading our sawmills, although we spent probably $70 million or so over the period. But looking at the markets today, we're very pleased that we have that power plant. It generates around $14 million a year of stable cash flow. It doesn't vary with exchange rates or duty impositions or fluctuations in housing starts and lumber prices. So that's the best part of our business right at this moment. We decided that we had to reposition our company and get a presence in the U.S. South. So our power plant was commissioned on April 24th, 2015, and a couple of months later we announced that we'd purchased a brownfield site in El Dorado, Arkansas, and then in July of last year we purchased a dimension lumber mill in Glenwood, Arkansas, and another mill in Cross City, Florida. The Cross City mill is about 55% in decking products and boards, and about 45% in dimension lumber. So I think if I'm reading the industry statistics correctly, we are about the 15th largest company in the lumber business in North America. So we have attributes of the small independents and a few attributes of some of the larger companies. Hopefully we picked the best from both business models, but only time will tell. I'd like to give you just a brief snapshot as to our revenue mix by product. You can see that in 2019 it's going to be pretty evenly balanced between the wholesale lumber business, which is in the dark gray, I believe, and then the other 2 big segments are the SPF business in Canada and the Southern Yellow Pine business down south. If you look at the other pie chart, you'll see that the U.S. is by far the dominant source of revenue for us, with China and Japan making up the balance, along with sales in Canada. We'll be releasing our financial results on Wednesday morning, and hopefully that bottom bar will be climbing up again as we grow our business. I was asked to include some slides on corporate sustainability and also on some of our reforestation activities. But, you know, I can tell you that as an industry, I think that our industry does good, and what I mean by that is that we are the heart and soul of so many forest-dependent communities in BC. I remember being in Fort St. James in 2008 when that mill hadn't operated for 27 months. Housing prices were collapsing. The community had lost its single largest source of tax revenue. Negative equity in homes was creating a lot of marriage breakups and so on. And once we got the mill restarted, there was a real bounce in everyone's step. And I think that every forest company in Canada, I think, has done a superb job in terms of a balanced scorecard rating. On the other hand, I don't think we've done that well because our profitability and share price performances has lagged so many sectors in Canada, and hopefully that we'll have a demand and pricing conditions that will get us back on track by that measure as well before too long. So thank you for your interest in Conifex, and I look forward to hearing from my fellow panelists.
Thank you very much, Ken. Next, I'd like to introduce Yves Laflamme. Mr. Laflamme is President and Chief Executive Officer and a member of the Board of Directors of Resolute Forest Products. He's a 37-year veteran of the industry as well as Resolute and his predecessor companies. He previously served as the company's Senior Vice President of Wood Products, Global Procurement, and Information Technology. Mr. Laflamme.
Bonjour, good morning. Thanks for being here and attending this panel. So I'm going to give you an overview of Resolute Forest Products. As you can see, I know most of you are here to hear about lumber, but you're going to see that if you're going to talk about Resolute, you have to talk about more than lumber. We're a North American forest product company, fully integrated from the trees to the, to the lumber, to value added, to high joist flooring, to cucumbers, and tissue, and a lot of stuff. So our sales last year were $3.8 billion US. We market our products in 70 countries. Where we manage woodlands, it's 100% certified by third party, could be FSC and SFI. We have about 7,400 employees. We had 8,000 at the end of 2018, but we sold a pulp mill in South Carolina and one in Western Virginia, And so that's where we decreased by about 600 employees. So we try to be as innovative as we can to transform the company because we're big, we're the largest producers in newsprint and big in printing and writing. And as you know, this market is decreasing by about 10 to 12% a year. So we have a TMP bio plant and a startup with FP Innovation in Thunder Bay, Western Ontario. As I said, I was talking about cucumbers. We have partnership with 49% interest in the greenhouse in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean in Quebec, which is connected to a synergy with our craft pulp mill. Just give you an idea, they grow about 50 million cucumbers per year, so on one phase. So we're talking about 4 phases potential. We have something also that, to capture the CO2 carbons solutions, and we have also a joint venture with Mercer to develop, the application for biofilaments. So facilities, we have 18 pulp and paper mills and tissue mills in North America, US and Canada. So we have, we're not in lumber in the US, but I was looking yesterday, not being in lumber, we bought last year 5 million short tons of wood to supply our pulp and paper mills, so we're on the market. And so we have 3 tissue mills that we just got about 2 years ago, 2 in Florida, one that we started being integrated with our pulp mill in Tennessee. and we have 19 wood products facility, which represent about 2.4 billion board feet capacity. They are located in Quebec and northwestern Ontario. We have a remanufacturing plant with producing bed frame, flooring strips, and two high-joist flooring engineered wood in partnership with Louisiana Pacific. We also in pellets. We have a pellet plant in northwestern Ontario. And energy, sometimes people don't think about it, but we have 5 hydroelectric dams and 6 cogeneration facilities in the US and Canada. So when you're looking at this, you know, as a CEO, you have quite a few places to go, you know. So it's a lot of facilities, and it's about 40, I think something like 42, including head office, of course. But, you know, and if you look again at lumber, we're talking about 19 wood facilities, mostly. I think out of the 19, we have 3 in northwestern Ontario, and the rest are here in Quebec. When I was talking about transformation strategy, you can see on our sales segment here that in 2011, the dark green was what we call the growing market, which is pulp, tissue, and wood. So, and most of it was mostly printing and writing paper. If you look at 2018, we're about 50-50 in sales, and the EBITDA is mostly what we call the growth markets, which are the projects I said, which are, you know, tissue business, wood, and pulp. So here you can see in North America, the capacity we have at 2.4, but the 2.4 is a little high. That's really the capacity we have, but it's the capacity we would produce if we had the wood. So it means that we're running more in the 1.9, 2 billion board feet a year. And I guess the future question, we can explain what's going on with the wood in Eastern Canada, if I know. Awards and recognition, you asked to talk about, you know, sustainability. So you can see that we got 36 awards and distinction in 2018, and all of them are either North America or, you know, global. So Corporate Glassware Innovation and Excellence Awards. We got also International Business Award, Stevie Award. We got the Business Intelligence Group Sustainability Leadership Awards. We got NFPA Leadership and Sustainability Award for safety. I won't go through all of them, but that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to introduce Stephen Sallah. Mr. Sallah is President and Chief Executive Officer of LBM Advantage. He joined ENAP in 2008 as the Chief Financial Officer and has been serving in his current role since January 2011. In 2016, he led a successful merger between PAL and ENAP to form LBM Advantage. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Bonjour. Good morning, everyone. I'm Steve Sallah, as he said, and I represent LBM Advantage. You can see on the screen we've had 4 offices around the country. In the Northeast, we have an office in New Windsor, New York. In the Midwest, we have an office in Grand Rapids, Michigan. To the bottom right, we have our office at IBSA office down in Smithfield, North Carolina. And the bottom left is, we don't own that whole building, but one of the floors of that building is our Monroe, Louisiana location. We house 100 employees in those offices and another 17 on the road or in remote locations. We are the fastest growing lumber cooperative, both by organic and means and also by mergers. Our history is, as LBM Advantage, we were formed in 2016 by the merger of 2 regional co-ops, ENAP and PAL. ENAP was located in the Northeast, headquartered out of New York, upstate New York, and PAL was headquartered in Michigan, Grand Rapids, Michigan. At the time, PAL was the oldest co-op in the country, LBM co-op in the country. IBS joined up with LBM Advantage, and the 3 co-ops became one in the 4th quarter of 2017. And just a little history, PAL, as I said, was the oldest in the country. Progressive Affiliated Lumbermen was formed in 1937, initially to buy shingles and to compete with Sears and Roebuck at the time. ENAP was formed in 1967, also to compete against some merchandisers selling shingles in the Northeast, and entered the lumber business the following year. And IBSA was formed in 1977. Just by coincidence, they all on the 7s there. And our goal is to provide our dealers national buying power with a regional expertise. And we do have 4 offices, and every market's a little different, and I think we serve our customers better by having a regional expertise in each of these locations. You can see a subset of some of the products we sell. As a thumb rule, we sell our dealers about half of what they sell. So our dealers, our members, the owners of our company as a co-op, they buy from us about half of what they sell, and they turn around and sell it to their end customers, which is primarily contractors and home builders. Got that thing there. Okay. What we do for our members, if they join the co-op, we provide them experienced staff, product expertise, and market information. We give them direct access to the mills and the manufacturers that they need to do business with, and that includes most of the mills that are here today. We give them competitive invoice pricing and payment terms. We pass the payment terms on that we're giving on to our members. And as a larger entity, we give them the ability to compete in the futures market, whether it be forward pricing, basis trading, or even hedging some of their inventory. We help them with that capability. We do provide reload capability, inventory for a majority of our customers, not everywhere. Where we have enough density of members, we will bring reloads in, lumber into our reloads by rail, and let them pull it as they need it and pay market prices at the time. We also provide them rebates, whether it's on manufactured products or by mills, and any excess service charge that we charge our members or any profits we might make in our reloads, those all get returned to our members at the end of the year. Other things we provide, some education. I'll talk a little bit about one of the education we do, but we do have seminars and webinars that we offer our dealers. Lately, it's been about succession planning. A lot of our dealers are aging, and we're helping them either sell to each other or find a way to exit through selling outside the co-op. We offer roundtables to discuss best practices. Some of our regions have pool groups. They meet monthly. And they will buy pool activities or just host a vendor that may tell them about some of the new products that are coming out and some of the buys that are coming out. We also advocate for our members, whether it's regionally through the associations or even going to Washington, D.C. and lobbying on behalf of the softwood lumber agreement or whatever. We will do that as well. We provide our mills and our vendors. We provide direct access to 1,100 full-service lumber yards and home centers. So it helps our vendors and our mills get directly to our customers, puts the inventory into their final location without having to compete with it later. Also, hopefully, there's a little bit more margin in it for our dealers and for the mills when they make this connection. We have an annual convention in the spring. That convention, we bring our dealers in. It's mostly focused on building products, but our annual fall conference is focused on forest products. We have every major mill that we do business with at that conference, as well as treaters, engineered wood producers, and even distributors that sell all of those products. Our dealers do depend somewhat on distributors as well. We offer our vendors and our mills the convenience of single billing and payment entity. We pay our bills on time and early. We've never missed a cash discount, and that's convenient for a lot of our vendors. We don't have to chase 1,100 lumber yards to get paid. We do that. We provide our vendors and mills market information. We're partners with you guys, and so we know that you need to know what we're hearing from our dealers in terms of where the market's going, what the housing's doing, and what prices are doing, and who's got inventory on the ground. That's hopefully helpful for our mills as well. Also, we give our vendors opportunities to market their products through our various websites and our shows. Here's where we started and where we ended. You can see the upper right, the blue was where ENAP started in 1967 and expanded to be mostly a very large regional co-op in the Northeast. In 2012, you can see the blue down toward Texas and Oklahoma and Arkansas. ENAP did open an office in 2012 in Louisiana to try to sell to that very fast-growing and different market, I guess. We were bumping into ourselves in the Northeast, and dealers were closing and merging, so we needed a chance to expand. And as I said earlier, in 2016, we joined forces with the green bars, PAL, in the Midwest, and in 2017, the red dots out in the Southwest. We're also continuing to move our expansion. Right now, we have 544 shareholders. They represent 1,096 lumber yards in 36 states. And we have 389 vendors that we do business with on a regular basis. One of the education things we're providing and one of the challenges that the industry is facing is an aging population. We have about 100 of our dealers participating with their with their kin or with their senior leadership, the younger folks that are coming up the ranks, a chance to participate twice a year in a Next Generation Conference. This is formal training on everything from banking to collections to human resources management, and it's a formal training program. Throughout the year, we do have seminars as webinars as well, and I think the networking of these younger folks has been a big benefit. One of our dealers has said that his son came back energized about the industry after coming to one of these events. So that's what we're trying to do to keep the independent lumberyard growing well into the future here. Lastly, I guess I'll close with our mission statement, usually open with it, but our mission as a co-op is to create a competitive advantage for our members by leveraging the collective power of the membership. And that's not just buying power, it's whatever else we can do for our folks at the same time, as I mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Next, I'd like to introduce Mathew Missad. Mr. Missad is Chief Executive Officer of Universal Forest Products. From 1996 to 2011, he was Executive Vice President, General Counsel, and Secretary, in addition to serving on the boards of subsidiary entities, including international partnerships. Mr. Missad's experience and exposure to nearly all facets of UFP's business is integral to the growth of the company. Please welcome Mr. Missad.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. We appreciate you having us here to present, and appreciate you getting up early in the morning. I'd also like to thank the Queen for such a fabulous venue here and for letting us stay in her hotel. Universal Forest Products started in 1955, and I'm not going to go through the whole history, but we've grown a fair amount over the years, and we've known many of the Canadian lumber mills and done business in Canada that whole time. So we now have a little over 130 locations worldwide. We are servicing primarily 3 distinct markets. So the markets we serve, the end markets, are construction. That includes roof trusses, floor trusses, wall panels, and building systems. That also includes manufactured housing, and it includes commercial construction and concrete forming. The retail sector is primarily either big box retail or independent retail. Our largest single item is preserved lumber, and we've been doing that since 1979. One of our very first customers was a small little upstart company called the Home Depot, and we delivered the first truckload of treated lumber to their very first store in Atlanta. And we've grown with them throughout the years, and we've also added business with other big box retailers as well as independent retail. The products there include not just wood, and I apologize for that. We do have wood plastic composite and non-wood items, including vinyl and aluminum and other materials as well. We do primarily outdoor living products. So you can see there is an example of our Decorators product line, which we're very proud of. And we also have our Pro Wood products, which is our preserved wood product line. The third major market that we serve is the industrial market. That includes agricultural bins, includes moving and storage boxes, includes specially designed engineered pallets and crates. It also includes furniture parts, and it includes kind of a catch-all for all other wood products that we sell. We're really excited about the future in all of these markets, and I'm normally fading the general market trends and predictions, and this year we still feel pretty confident until I get in a group of our peers and we find out that I'm thinking the wrong way. So look forward to that discussion. So capital investments is something that we were asked to talk a little bit about. Obviously, what we try to do is we want to grow our business. We have great markets and great end markets. We will acquire in each of those markets, the industrial, the retail, as well as the construction. And as you can see, just a couple of examples of things we've acquired. We've acquired over 20 companies in the last 5 years, and we remain very acquisitive. That's key to our growth. The other thing that we're really proud of is kind of how we interact with the community. A couple of things that I wanted to call out. Each of our locations is a great corporate citizen within the communities they operate in, and they're encouraged to go out and support community initiatives and to help the employees with a wide variety of things. Affordable housing is something that we're very passionate about, and so we volunteer for things like Habitat for Humanity. We also are working with a variety of cities to try to come up with better ways to make housing affordable, kind of get government out of the way, and allow the homeowners the opportunity to actually own a home. The other thing that I wanted to call out is the UFP Business School. I had the opportunity to talk with a few folks last night about what I believe is a broken secondary education system where people are spending an ungodly amount of money to get an education that at the end of the day may not be worth the investment, at least in my view. So what we have done is started in 2016 our very first class of UFP Business School. What that is it's a 2 or 3 year program where the students come in, we give them a full scholarship for the academic portion. We only teach them the courses that are necessary for their major, so we don't give them what I call the campus builder courses. Those are the courses that colleges make you take just so you can get your degree, but you don't really want to take them. So we've been able to go through this. We graduated our first class. The picture is there. There were 9 students that graduated. 8 of them have come to work for us. And the only reason the 9th one didn't is because he decided he didn't want to move afterwards. So it's something that we're looking forward to. They come out of school. They have a degree from the UFP Business School. They have a job, which is, I think, what most people go to college for, is to end up with a job. So we're excited about this, and if there's anybody interested in starting something like this in your own organization, I'd love to talk to you about it. It's not something we're trying to keep proprietary, but I think it's really, really helpful for the next generation, and they don't come out with any debt. They have a part-time job while they're in school with us, and so they get paid for that. It actually is great for the parents. We're still trying to work on the kids to make sure that they don't miss out on all the parties at the colleges. And that's it. Thank you again for letting us be here.
Thank you very much. Well, as you can see, we have a very strong cross-section of the entire industry, so we'll be able to get a good viewpoint on the questions that we're about to ask from each of the different sectors. So the first question that we're going to ask is about the North American market and the economy. In the last few years, we've taken us through an extraordinary roller coaster ride, a combination of factors such as transportation bottlenecks, reduced BC production, pent-up demand in the U.S., trade dispute, and an end of a long period of economic growth is affecting the entire building materials sector. So the question is, what is your opinion on the current and future supply and demand situation, and where do you see the economy heading, and how will these influences affect your business? Ken, if you can start, that would be great.
Okay, well, thank you. I thought that I might talk a little bit more about the supply side, because we've got leading distribution companies here that are closer to the customer day in and day out than I happen to be. But generally, I think that the demand side of our business is pretty healthy and will stay robust. But I think there's probably not full recognition given to what could happen to the supply side from British Columbia. And there are 2 key drivers to looming supply reductions that I see. One is biological, in the sense that the mountain pine beetle salvage harvest program has pretty much run its course, and we're going to be focusing on greener wood moving forward from here, and the harvest levels on the remaining greenwood are materially lower than they are presently. And the second is economic, in the sense that in our case, our delivered log costs went up about 15% in 2017 and 20% in 2018. So that's an increase of something like $20 a cubic meter, which is $70 per 1,000 board feet. And by some measures, I think our log costs were contained at least as good as the rest of the industry. So in BC, what happened when the lumber price bubble popped in the second half of last year with the higher log costs, in Q4, the BC industry shifted into negative EBITDA generation, and that has propelled the spate of capacity adjustment announcements that we've heard later, and I think they've got further to go. So I think that lumber prices will be at well above average levels through the balance towards the end of this year and in the following year.
Great, thank you, Ken. Yves, do you have some comments?
Yeah, so I think as far as the economy, I think the economy is pretty strong in the U.S. and in Canada, over North America. Of course, we're going to have a recession. It's just about the when, you know, like weather forecast. So, but so far so good, and unemployment is pretty low, and as low as we're running out of labor, as in most of the industry. Talking about the supply, which is pretty similar to what's going on in BC, except the trees are much smaller in the east. I mean, we're running out of wood that, you know, what happened in the past with some, you know, sustainability issue and pressure to the politicians that, you know, since 2000, the Quebec, as an example, the wood supply has been reduced by about 20%. So that you don't have enough wood for the number of sawmills you have. So if you are the owner of the supply, what do? You don't have enough wood for all the sawmills you have. You put a system with wood on the market, on auction. Because if you want to run your mill, you know the last marginal stick is going to be pretty expensive. So our wood cost went up since 2000, since the new regime system, which I believe was in 2013, by about 36% per cubic meter. So, and having said that, about 90% of it is a stumpage. So, and that creates a big issue on the supply side, and cost as well. So, which puts our, you know, our industry in Eastern Canada less competitive. And then, you know, there is more and more issue about camping, about the boreal, and, you know, if you're in a big city, you don't understand at all about wood and forest. The only thing you can understand is wood, just giving less. Then we're going to feel comfortable. And then at the other side, there is always that threat about, you know, going to be more protection. It's the caribou, it's everything. And then you're looking for employees. Where should you go to work for the forest industry? Every single year they're talking about fighting about something, about protecting their wood, they're going to lose jobs. So to me, that's the best challenge we have, or not the best, but the worst challenge we have in Eastern Canada as far as supply. Same thing in Northwestern Ontario where we have facilities, and then, you know, you need to convince contractors that to go in the woodlands, and their family business, you know, and then if you don't have the trees, you don't have, it's kind of a chain, you know. So that's to me the big challenge in supply in Eastern Canada. Pretty much the same, I guess, in BC, what I heard. So,
thank you, Yves. Steve, perhaps you could speak on behalf of what you're seeing on the supply side and also forecasting on the economic side.
Yes, sir. I can talk a little on the demand side. I was surprised that I'm still really new to the industry, entering my 12th year. I'm always surprised at the elasticity in price versus supply in this industry. I came from a semiconductor manufacturer, so a slight deviation in demand would cause memory chip prices to collapse, and it's not too different in this market. We have heavy capital and people trying to keep their mills full. But seeing the collapse last year got a lot of our members concerned. I think there were concerns about stocking up on too much inventory when prices are high, and add that to the rail and the trucking shortages, and there became some challenges last year. Right now, I think supply and demand seem to be pretty stable. I think pricing is where people want it to be. You see some small deviations week to week, but not like you did last year. The demand side, I think I'm a little bit bullish, I guess. I'm with Matt on that I think the market still has a lot of tailwinds to it. I think the headwinds facing our dealers is going to be the labor shortage. I think the interest rates, if they go up anymore, although I understand yesterday they're going to hold them flat, at least for the rest of the year. And I think that there's still, this next generation doesn't want to buy homes in acre lots right now. They're still happy moving into the cities and building up in condos in New York and Boston and places like that. So our dealers have benefited from the R&R business associated with that. But overall, I'm bullish that we're going to have a pretty good year in construction. It won't be even at close to historical levels, and certainly not peak levels. But as long as things keep inching up, it'll be good. I think the biggest headwind we face, and very little discussion on that, is just the overall expense of homes, especially given the next generation that's saddled with debt. A lot of our dealers are in rural towns where you can buy a used home for $150,000, $160,000, 3-bedroom ranch. Now, to build the equivalent home is closer to $300,000, including the land. So it's very hard to compete in those markets. So we do have some headwinds, but I think for the next couple of years, employment being what it is, we're going to have a pretty good year in construction and housing. So.
Great, thank you. Coming from Vancouver, $150,000 doesn't get you much. So Matt, would you have some comments to the questions, please?
Yeah, I think I'm with Steve more on the demand side. We're seeing, you know, obviously a number of weather-related challenges, and I always get concerned this time of year about is spring actually going to show up, and are people actually going to do what they thought they would do? The good news for us is that when the weather is good and you have a good weekend, we can see the spike in the demand. So it makes us feel really good about the demand profile. I think it'll be overall either a modest increase or flat. But I think it's very regional within the United States, too. I think there's certain states, call out California, that they're probably going to struggle to keep up with the kind of rate of growth that they were hoping for. But the rest of the country and in the markets that are more stable, I still see good, solid growth, again, barring some unforeseen economics changes. The interest rate environment's important. And I think much is made of the millennials and whether or not they want to own a house. And again, I'll beat the affordability drum because the family formation is tending to be delayed, which I think kind of pushes back the need for their own house. Everybody kind of wants to stay in a group, but I think the debt levels are what concerns us more about future ability to buy homes is coming out of college again with high levels of debt and their ability to, they already have a mortgage when they get out of school and they don't even have a house. So we're hoping that we can come up with solutions for that in the future and allow them to buy a home if they choose to.
Great, thank you very much. I'd like to go on to the next question, and it's to deal with changing markets. Society is going through drastic changes, such as the introduction of new technologies and the acceptance of green building and labor shortages in both the manufacturing and building sectors, which you've alluded to earlier today. What are the question is, what are the key opportunities and challenges for wood products in a rapidly changing world? Yves, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. You know, as far as the wood products and the, you know, the new projects, they are suddenly, you know, what we see about the, you know, it's not really new, but the glue lamp, the beams, and all those products that are coming on the market. I think that they are great. They have great opportunities, you know. So, and same thing when we're talking about the on-site buildings. It's not necessarily, you know, innovation, but that's something that there is some bottleneck, certainly in the U.S., you know, as far as building. Is this just about financing? Certainly labor. A few labor's issue could be fixed with those, you know, those manufacturing housing on site. That would help a lot. So, and of course, of the rest of the industry, if we're not talking just about lumber, there are a lot of projects in innovation that, you know, could be biofuel and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, if we can find solutions for that, when we were talking about paper going down and the residual product from sawmills, it's going to give a big opportunity for lumber as well. Because, you know, if you're in a sawmill, you're going to do something when lumber is good, but, you know, you have a big majority of your products that is residual, and you have to do something with it.
Thank you very much. Stephen, do you have some comments?
Yeah, I think there's been opportunity for our dealers to grow and with some of the different applications of wood, especially multifamily and commercial construction. Our dealers have hit their pre-recession levels, even though the industry's half its size, primarily because they have entered new markets and done different things with products, but also there's also fewer dealers out there in their town. I have observed that there's been a lot of move, especially in the Midwest, toward this manufactured components. I visited with a dealer in Ohio last week who has doubled the size of his manufacturing capacity. He's a retail lumber dealer, but he also has manufacturing capability. He shared a story with me that it does take a long time to get contractors to adapt. I did construction during my college years 40 years ago, and the way we build a home hasn't changed much even in that time, but I think we're going to have to undergo some significant changes to overcome the labor shortage. But when you do overcome it, he said contractors do adapt, and he shared a story with a contractor after he built his second home using the construction of manufacturing components. He's now building 2 homes a month versus 1 home a month with the same number of people. And that's a huge advantage for a builder once they can adapt to that technology. And as he said, it's less dependent on framing skills than it used to be. So if he does have somebody leave, he can he can replace them more easily. I think that long term is going to be where things head. To overcome the labor shortage, there's no other way to do it, no better way to do it really than build some high quality parts off site and bring them to the job site. And the flexibility they have to do almost any kind of home now with that construction, with the software and stuff they use is remarkable. So I'm pretty optimistic on that.
Great, thank you. Matt, in your presentation, you sort of alluded to some of the changes that Universal's doing. Could you speak to that?
Sure. I think for us, we believe that technology and automation is really going to accelerate our ability to produce more with fewer people, and probably will take out some jobs that most people really don't want to do. Some of the more difficult work in our facilities tends to be picking and moving lumber. So by automating that process, having better material flow, that will take a burden off the employee pool that they really don't want to do, and very difficult for us to find. On the technology side, again, I know much has been made about the notion of building more of a home in a factory, and I applaud that idea. I think it's outstanding, and I think the customers that we sell have been doing it since 1955. So that's not really a new concept. It's really about how do you streamline the value chain and how do you work through the supply side of that issue and take costs out. Again, the ultimate goal being let's make homes more affordable. I think the flip side is the part that scares me the most, and that's more a societal issue, and that is as you kind of look at what this does to the employment opportunities in the future, the more technology you have, the fewer jobs there are going to be available, and I think part of it for us is do we as a community, do we as individuals want to spend more money to have something made locally and employ people in our market, or do we want to take costs out kind of no matter what, to the exclusion of having jobs in our local communities for those individuals? I think that's the bigger societal challenge, and that's kind of the flip side of all this technology.
Great, thank you. So the third question is the one that everyone wants to understand better, and that's about the softwood lumber agreement. Nothing's changed when it comes to lumber trade between the U.S. and Canada. Once again, we're stuck in litigation. Protectionism in general is on the rise, and the U.S. trade wars are having an effect on the global economy. What are the conditions required to reach an agreement? And what are the current U.S. softwood lumber dispute? And what's the anticipated timing of an agreement? Stephen, would you like to start with that? Or?
Sure. I don't know what the timing of the agreement is. I wish I knew. Months, years away. One of the things that strikes me is it's so important to us, but I read the Wall Street Journal every day, and I see very little coverage of the softwood lumber agreement, and I don't think it's in anybody's forefront right now. I think NAFTA, the new NAFTA, is taking a higher priority. I think the administration's working hard on the China agreement right now, which is I think the two priorities. For the most part, I think from outside the industry, people looking at the situation as being stable. Even talking to a mill last night. They've all seemed to adapted to the tariffs and the lack of an agreement right now, and supply is still, half of the lumber is still being exported, and most of that is into the United States. So I guess we'll continue on, but I don't have any foresight of when that's going to happen. I think it's going to take a better priority from both sides to get it solved quicker, and that won't happen until I think NAFTA and the China trade agreement and other things that are going on in Washington that are taking precedent right now are fixed.
Thank you. Matt, do you have any comments?
Yeah, so this will be controversial, I'm sure, but if I ever had a dispute with someone, the last person I'd call to solve it is the government. And if I had a dispute with somebody else in another country, the last person I'd call is both governments. So I think the solution is well within hand within the mills. And I'll tell you, I'm an opponent of tariffs, but I'm also an opponent of subsidies. So I like to have free trade, and I like to have fair trade in that sense. I think the challenge in talking to the Canadian mills we work with as well as the U.S. mills is there's obviously an economic and a business case that the U.S. mills would like to have higher prices. Who wouldn't? The consumer wouldn't. That's the person that I look to and say, we've got to protect them. So for me, I think there's a solution here, and I don't know if the stumpage is being subsidized, which is alleged by the U.S. side. And I'm sure Yves has a good opinion, and that's shared by almost every Canadian mill that I've talked to. But it ought to be a fairly straightforward question to figure out whether there is or there isn't. And if there is and a tariff is required, it should only be the difference in the spread on that stumpage. It shouldn't be a percentage of whatever the product sells for. So I think there's a solution there, but I think you've got too much wrangling going on between the respective government negotiators instead of just getting the mills in a room and letting them, you know, maybe you put them in a cage or a cage match and see how it works out.
Yves, I think you have a point that you'd like to make.
Yeah. Yeah, first, you know, it's the 5th case. I'm old enough to have seen a few of them. And when you're talking about a deal, so we don't have to have a deal because every single deal we've had always been worse than the last one. So, and, you know, as a company, in 2018, we had 5 cases with the U.S. One on the SC paper on subsidized, one on subsidized on the uncoated ground wood, one on anti-dumping in the uncoated ground wood, one on subsidized on the lumber, and one on anti-dumping in lumber. So it's 5 cases. There's not so many companies in Canada like that. So now we have lumber left. And at the end of the day, with the ITC in the U.S. on uncoated ground wood, we won with 5 judges, you know, being no subsidized, no anti-dumping. So the point is that we went to the law, didn't make a deal. The other deal on the SC was writing down a check. You write down a check and you're not subsidized anymore. So kind of, you know. So, and in lumber last time, we left $1 billion across the border. And then we had, you know, we had quotas, a restriction to ship to the U.S. Means at the end that we gave big money to our competition, even though we have quite a few assets in the U.S., but I'm talking as a Canadian lumber producer now. And so the point at the end that they had money and they made sure that we closed before they did. So, and that's what we call, you know, a kind of protectionism. So, and at the end, you're right, Mathew, when you're saying that governments are involved in Canada more than the U.S. is in the U.S. In the U.S., it's about the, you know, I feel that the industry is more involved than in Canada. I mean, negotiator in Canada negotiate for government. And what happened in Quebec, as an example, I remember when we had this new forestry regime that I was talking about earlier that increased our cost by 36%. I talked with the minister. I said, you know, we're going to be less competitive by 36%. Yeah, but you're going to be on the auction market. That's what the U.S. wants. And then at the end of the day, you're going to pay just one. You won't pay duty in the U.S. anymore. Now we have both. So this is why, to me, it's making a deal. When it's a fair deal, it might be good. But so far, you know, the experience I have and we have as a company, and again, I'm not talking just about lumber. You can see that is it really subsidized or just waiting that the pot grow big enough that we can write down a bigger check. So that's my concern.
Okay, Ken, I mean, you most probably have an interesting perspective, having mills on both sides of the border, but also alluding to the issues with cost in BC and the 20% duty, the impact it has.
Okay, well, building on Yves' comments and the other panelists' comments, here's my assessment. First of all, any objective body that is opining and observing that the U.S. South lumber business has what U.S. forestry consultants refer to margins, lumber margins, that are the envy of the world, and you've got Canadian mills with negative EBITDA, clearly I do not see any justification for suggestions that there's material subsidies in Canada. Secondly, I think that with the passage of time and as we go through the appeal processes under NAFTA and WTO that are underway, that there'll be more powerful evidence building up that refutes the existence of subsidies in Canada. And thirdly, the impression I have is that the thought leaders in the U.S. coalition are actually probably the timberland owners because there's a lot of pressure down there to get stumpage rates higher. And the longer this dispute goes on, the more Canadian investment there is in the U.S. They build, Canadians typically build bigger mills. You know, the average mill in the U.S. South was about 125 million board feet. in 2012, and the average mill in BC was over 250 million board feet. And based on what Canadians and others are doing in the U.S., the average mill will be 250 million board feet about the end of 2020. So what I see happening is that the sawmill sector is gaining heightened control over log pricing and stumpage rates in the U.S. So this move by timberland owners to use these duties as a way to prop up stumpage prices, some of them may realize that this is starting to backfire, and that could be a catalyst to a settlement before too long.
Great, thank you. Did anyone have any comments on basically what the others have said? Or?
I just want to remind, I don't like subsidies at all, and that includes the U.S.'s subsidy of companies like Tesla for, I don't understand why I'm paying $7,500 for somebody to buy an electric car. So I just want to be fair.
I would like to ask Ken and Yves. Yves, you made a mention of quota, and depending on where you are in the country, there seems to be a different opinion on an outcome of the softwood lumber agreement and where quota will actually fit in. It'd be interesting to hear your perspective on where you see quota within an agreement, and Ken, the same from British Columbia perspective.
Well, I think that I see quota as a disaster. I mean, I don't see. I mean, I think on that one, there's two things here. First of all, is it about a deal? I don't think it's time to make a deal or something like that with what I said earlier. And I don't think that either side is ready for a deal right now for all the reasons I said. So as far as quotas, these kind of rumors or whatever it is, a trend believing that BC or the Western producers are against quotas and Eastern Canada is. And as far as I can see in Quebec and part of Ontario, I mean, we're against quotas. I mean, that's the problem with quotas. If you are in the West, at least you have access to, more access, I would say, to the Asian market for lumber. And if you are in Canada, in Eastern Canada, you have the U.S. and then you have Canada pretty much. And if you are in the West and you don't have enough sales to go to foreign countries like Asia, the other country left, the other business left is Eastern Canada pretty much as a market. It's not just about the impact of what it's going to have in the U.S. because people sometimes are saying that quota is going to push prices up. It's going to be good for you. Yeah, it's going to be good to push prices up for half of our volume, but half of our volume go down by about 20-30% because the Canadian market is going to go like that. We have to take that into account. This is why, as a company, we're really against quotas.
Okay, well, to be clear, I've always respected Yves and Resolute's view that the best solution is free trade in lumber, and let's put up a heck of a fight and hopefully achieve that outcome. In terms of the quota versus duty debate, sadly, I am not aware of any objective analysis that's been done to measure the economic and social impacts of the two systems. Government in the West seems to be reluctant to consider quotas because it puts government in the position of, quotes, determining winners and losers by the way that the quota allotments are done. So I have an open mind. I could go either way. There was rumors that there was a 28% market share opportunity in the trade dispute early on in the negotiations. Based on the supply analysis and harvest level analysis that we did, I didn't see how Canada could bump up to that 28% market share. And I thought it was an acceptable outcome. If you look at what's happening in the marketplace today, the duties that we are paying, and we're a small company. We've paid $35 million in duties since they've been started. But what the impact of the duties are is that it's reducing our mill net, which is limiting our ability to go into pine beetle damaged stands. We can't afford to go into the low valued stands anymore. So it's effectively, the duties are having the effect of accelerating the curtailments in the BC lumber industry, in my opinion.
Great, thank you. So we've had some really good information coming out today and some opinions. So it's most probably an appropriate time for people to, from the audience, to ask some questions. We've got an opportunity to have a great panel here, so I hope people have some questions. This is the microphone cube for those that didn't attend yesterday. So they'll throw the cube at you. You have to be very, your catching abilities are important or you'll get hit in the head. And so please, if anyone has some questions, please feel free to stick up your hand and we'll get started. Not all at once, please. Okay, why don't I ask one then? Could you gentlemen tell me, in terms of logistics, there's been a number of issues with rail cars and trucking and labor and so on. Can you just tell us how logistics is impacting your businesses right now? Yves?
Yeah, logistics is impacting our business, and you know, in all aspects, actually. You know, I was talking at the beginning of the, you can start with the woodland. Sometimes we're talking about logistics at, you know, just on the finished goods. But, you know, there is a shortage of labor, you know, operators, truck drivers in the bush. You know, if you don't want to drive a truck in the bush anymore, you're going to find, you know, something easier, or maybe in town or something like that with less hour. What happens? Then you have less wood because you have less truck drivers. So it's an issue, and it's pretty tight. You know, if you have, again, talking more about Canada here, that you know, you have all you need, and suddenly you have a snowstorm or something like that, or holidays, you have to catch up because, you know, lumber market is not like really stable. Sometimes you don't ship, you have inventories, and then you want to catch up. You know, you don't have the logistics to do it less than ever. So, and then you have rails. So rails is another thing. You know, the service of rail is not that great. And you had a pretty good experience last year. You know, you saw that lumber went up like crazy, and housing started to move. So something happened. There was a rail issue, mostly in the West. You know, so it's a significant issue. We're going to have to think about. I mean, I know everybody is thinking about being more innovative in wood and wood transportation and finished goods. And I think that, you know, containers and all that stuff, and probably, you know, something by barge or by you know, using vessels. And you know, we already do some stuff from one of our sawmill going to the south, and we're doing it on pulp and paper. Sometimes we're loading paper and putting lumber on the top of the vessel. You know, some stuff like that you have to look at, because it's you know, it's nice to produce stuff, but you can deliver, and it's not good service for customers either. So.
Right. Stephen, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, our dealers experienced the rail issue last year, and an impact on pricing caused a lot of, more than I'd ever seen anyway in my 12 years on the industry. Our impact longer term has been on trucking, the flatbed trucking. It's still largely a mom and pop operation out there, and we have 15 reloads around the country. We're bringing wood in because of rail issues and price issues. We're trying to get as close to our dealers, carry as much inventory as we can carry financially. We don't like it, a lot of price risk for us to have it in there, but now we've got to get it out. And if there's no truckers, we're sending truckers out 200-300 miles sometimes from our reloads to get deliveries made. So I think the rail issue, other than last year, and we lose some priority, I guess. Wood doesn't get rotten like a lot of other things do, so it tends to take a back seat to other products for a while. But I think long term we've got to solve the trucking issue. The average trucker, I guess, is in his 60s now, and nobody's joining the fleet. Nobody wants to be away for multiple days, I'm told. And now the risk of driverless cars, driverless trucks, is getting even young people concerned that it could be a temporary career if they did go into it. So I don't know what the solution is to that. It's forced our dealers to carry more inventory, impacting their working capital and their banking issues, and also puts them at risk for pricing when they have that much inventory on the ground. So we've reacted to it by putting more in reloads. But again, if we don't have the trucking to get it out, it doesn't solve the problem. So I wouldn't say long-term trucking is more of an issue right now than rail, but I don't have the same experience these guys do with the rail.
Matt, you were nodding your head most of the time he was speaking, so you must probably have some thoughts as well.
Yeah, I guess we have concerns on both types of transportation, both rail and trucking. I think on the rail side, last year, one of the things that I would point to as to why the lumber market did what it did kind of in the second quarter is the fact that there was a lot of double ordering in the system. You ended up buying product to be shipped by rail. The rail was late, unreliable, so you had to buy it and have it shipped by truck. And then ultimately you ended up with both orders getting shipped there eventually, and no place to go with it. So I think that is a problem that has to be solved. And for any of the railway people that are in here, I guess my view of it is that they are maximizing their profitability and less concerned about making sure that all the deliveries get made that people want to have made. And I think that's probably a reasonable short-term view of the world, but long-term, it's not going to be good for the rail system, because I think alternative forms, whether that's barge or other ways of getting the product there. And on the U.S. side, I think the misguided regulatory environment, again, it's probably a theme that you're all hearing from me, but the misguided regulatory environment on transportation, particularly truck drivers, I know there was an idea to limit their duty day, and that would somehow make it safer. The challenge is at least for us and others, instead of being able to run 3 loads out a day and come back, now you're stuck with 2. So the drivers actually get less time on the clock because you're reluctant to send them out, because they might run into their duty day if they're late getting unloaded, and then they can't get back home. So you're stuck with a truck somewhere, and so logistically you just decide you're going to work less. And so it's been counterintuitive for the driver. The driver were hoping they were going to make more money and not less, and it's actually worked out to be the opposite. So the big hiring numbers are high, but the actual numbers that they get paid is making it a challenge. So hopefully there'll be some other wise solutions on that challenge, but the logistics is a big problem.
So Ken, from your experience, you have mills in northern British Columbia, and then you have mills in Arkansas. What's the difference that you see in terms of logistics and how it's impacting your business?
Well, the fundamental difference I see is that we seem to have more surge capacity in northern BC than we do in the U.S. South. And by that, what I mean is that if we lose 3 or 4 days of harvesting in northern BC, we seem to be able to sprint and catch that up pretty easily. Whereas in the U.S. South, there just doesn't seem to be the harvesting and logging truck capacity to do catch up and to sprint back and get you a normal situation. So in this wet weather period that we've had, there's several mills that have had their log piles run down to 0 and have ceased operation. So my view of the relative shortage of harvesting and trucking is that it is going to counterbalance all the capital that's going into new greenfield construction in the U.S. South. It will impede all that new capacity being fully utilized, because the challenge, in my opinion, is going to be getting the fiber harvested and across the scales and into the yard for those mills to run at their design rates.
I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to give you all the opportunity to get in on the questions, so get them ready. From a distribution perspective, Matt, could you explain what impact green building is having in terms of your customers, in terms of the demand, and what you're seeing in terms of the way that the business is going? And are your customers asking for more green building materials? Is it influencing their buying decisions? Are you seeing anything happening on that side?
Yeah, probably the wrong guy to ask that question to, but I've been in the industry for 40 years now, and I always thought lumber was the most green material there was. You know, it's renewable. And for a long time, for whatever reason, lumber wasn't green, and now I'm glad people finally caught up to that concept. So we are seeing, I wouldn't say it's a big demand. It was probably bigger 10 years ago, quite frankly, but I think the discussion around it is bigger, and it's, it's kind of your carbon footprint and what are you doing to stop that, and how do you end up with a zero carbon home? There's more talk about that. I'm not sure that anybody has really the right idea, and again, to me, it comes back to affordability. At the end of the day, are people willing to pay for it, or aren't they? And I haven't seen that leap yet to pay to have a zero carbon home, unless it's a really tiny house.
Okay. Stephen, do you have any thoughts?
Well, these guys are also better to answer than I am. We saw a lot of activity maybe 7 or 8 years ago. Our dealers were getting into some FSC certified, and we get involved in the paper trail on some of that stuff, but it seems to have stabilized now. We're not hearing a whole lot of changes. most of our dealers and their customers are focused on other aspects of the construction in terms of being green, in terms of the insulation and the windows and the sheathing and sealing up the home is where most of the focus is going. And there's a lot of regulations changing around that, region by region, county by county around the United States. And so we end up having to deal with that more than the lumber side right now.
Okay. Yves, I know you've had your challenges, so perhaps you could comment from your perspective.
Yeah, I think that I'm going to answer that question on two aspects. The first one being that, yes, I think that, lumber or wood products is a fully renewable resource and probably one of the only one in building materials. So, and we see a trend right now that, people believe in it and they see that, and, what the trees are growing, it captures the greenhouse gas and the carbon and everything is great. On the other hand, we see more movement from all the disasters being created by plastic bottle and bags. And at the beginning, they were advertising that to save trees, And now they're kind of moving on more on the I would say the paper bags and coming back, which is great. On the other hand, greener it is, and better it is, and everybody agrees with that, and more pressure we have to kill the wood business and the lumber industry and the woodlands operation by, using that wave of the, UN saying that, the planet's going to die in a few years or if we don't do anything, then look, okay, that's a great idea. Talk about caribou, talk about everything because everybody believes in that now. So that's pretty dangerous. That's the other aspects of the. I read something now. It's NRDC and Stan in the U.S. that making a big deal about when you're going to the restroom, you're flushing the boreal forest, and fortunately, it works. I mean, that's people believe that, first of all. Fortunately, we have tissue business in the U.S. I mean, if you do that in the U.S., you're not flushing the boreal, which is good. But having said that, if you're in Quebec and Eastern Canada, at least in Quebec, you're not allowed to harvest the trees and put it in the chipper. You have to produce 2x4, you have to produce lumber. So what goes to pulp and paper business is residual that you have to bury if you don't do it. But, people don't see that. That's the other aspect I see. It's too bad. Everybody agrees that it's greener, is the right thing to do, but don't do it. It's kind of a, so that's my just at Resolute, we just, and not under the pressure of any activist, we decided to cancel or not using plastic bottles anymore. And just in our plants, surprisingly, it was 1.5 million bottles a year. So, and that's the right thing to do. But campaigning about false information, that's not good at all. So that's mine. I could talk forever.
Say, John, I was going to turn the tables on you in the sense that I get the impression that the Softwood Lumber Board and the Canada Wood Group and so on are making important inroads into using wood in new markets other than single-family residential construction. Can you just share a couple of your observations about the potential growth and demand as a result of those initiatives?
Sure. I think from the numbers that I've read coming from organizations such as FPI as an example, they sort of see that the tall wood market is potential for in the neighborhood of around 2 billion feet a year. And that's using for CLT, glue laminated, and other construction. That's for the North American market. From the offshore markets, we're promoting aggressively in China. While we do have offices in Korea, Japan, and in India as well, but we see there's a good opportunity to capture a share of the Chinese market. And to give you an example, if you captured 5% of the 1 to 6 story market in China, it's equivalent of around 1.2 billion feet. If you capture 25% of the non-residential market in Japan, it's in the neighborhood of around 500 million feet. Interestingly enough, someone said it yesterday in one of the questions was, where's the wood going to come from? That was more of a concern than anything else. But with that being said, I think from everyone that I've spoken with, in the south there seems to be a fairly large supply of standing timber there that can most probably help out. Not necessarily good for Canada in terms of hitting that market, but with us looking at it from a global perspective, I think that's there's good opportunities, and you'll see there was a presentation yesterday from the Softwood Lumber Board that laid out a lot of the opportunities that are being created today. So there is a really good future for wood in construction, and it is green, and that's the way it's being perceived, much to what you've all been saying. So there's another opportunity for your questions. And so I'd encourage someone, if anyone, we got a question over there. Hope you can catch. Well done.
Don't worry about that. My question is about educational program. Human resources are an issue, and everybody are looking for automation and robotics. But does your employees are ready, qualified, and receptive to convert to automation? I'm not talking about a professional as an engineer or technician, but people who's working on the floor. So that's the first part of my question. And the other one, what about these professional salesmen? Do you need more professional salesmen? And do we have to add qualification for them?
Matt, you may want to talk about the professional salesman because you talked about it earlier. So,
sure. Yeah, part of the whole future in the technology area is how many people are just going to buy off of their computer. You know, you kind of think of the Amazon model. I really don't need a salesperson. I'm going to go online. I'm going to pick what I want, and I'm going to buy it. We still believe that it's a relationship-driven business, and it's important to have salespeople that can explain the features and benefits of your products versus your competitors, and they can talk about your company in an appropriate way and help you win the business. We still think that's going to be important. So yes, we need more salespeople for sure, and it's going to be a more challenging job because right now the information and the data that's out there is ubiquitous. Everyone can see it. So it's now going to be more difficult, I think, for the salespeople. With respect to the employees, we have a little over 12,000 employees in Universal, and the vast majority of them are working in production type roles. And the question about whether they're capable of being computer operators as opposed to being saw operators, we obviously are very, very invested in making sure that they're capable of doing that. And we provide them with the training to do that. But again, as I mentioned earlier, I think kind of as a societal issue, there will be fewer jobs in that type of an environment. And the solutions that have been thrown out there, things like social income and other things, scare me more than probably everything else combined.
Did anyone want to answer the question on automation and were people being trained for automation?
Well, I think if I could add something, just add, that's a really good question that's been asked, because I've seen in a few sawmills and few places where, you know, we're in the north with no big population, and you know, you invest a lot of money, which is really good news for the communities. But at the end of the day, you know, it's new technology, and you don't have the labor with, you know, the training and the knowledge to manage that. And then, first of all, it's a big problem not having those employees. The second one, that what you do when you don't have it, UP consultants coming from somewhere else gets pretty expensive. So that would be my comment on that.
I was going to add that, you know, to have the U.S. South meet this supply gap in lumber, and given the labor shortage, it's clear to me that as an industry, the sawmill sector is going to invest capital to make up for the absence of labor. If you read the West Fraser press release when they bought the Gilman mills, if I remember correctly, that they acquired 700 million board feet of capacity and had something like 900 employees. And in a new mill, a mill that we operate, we have 134 people for 180 million board feet a year. So if you take a look at the board footage per employee, it's double. And our mill isn't the state of the art. There are better mills. And so as I see it, we prefer to put our capital to work in machine centers and train people to run these new machine centers rather than have the high turnover in entry-level employees, which brings with it safety and other concerns.
Thanks, Ken. Did anyone have any other questions? Okay, well, what I'll do is just wrap up sort of in a summary from the questions that we had today. The first one was on the North American market and the economy. We heard from Quebec and BC, both talked about supply issues, whether it was related to cost or biological issues. The panel all pretty much agreed that supply and demand are going to be good this year, but there is some concerns about affordability. In terms of the changing market, there's sort of a bottleneck with labor and prefabrication. We talked about, there's discussions about bioproducts, manufactured components and adapting to the market from that side, and tech and innovation happening with automation involved in that as well. And from the softwood lumber agreement, there's little coverage and not really a priority from what we're hearing from the press. It's sort of more driven around the trade war issues or trade files in terms of agreements with China and so on. We should really let the businesses address it and stay away from the government. And the timberland owners seem to be driving this more than the consumer or anything else. So that being said, I'd really like to thank the panel very, very much for your contribution today and taking time out of your busy schedules. Greatly appreciated. It was a very interesting conversation. So thank you very much. I'd like everyone to applaud.